Alrighty. Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us for today's October coffee hour. My name is Jessica Claire and I'm with Sustainable CT. And if you've ever wondered how to get electric school buses in your town, this session today is for you. We are joined by Kevin Moss, who's a senior manager for clean transportation at the Connecticut Green Bank, who's going to discuss their electrification accelerator. Say that 10 times fast. So Kevin, really want to thank you for spending time to discuss. You're going to share some regulatory updates, funding updates, and information on how towns can sign up for your Green Bank Spring 2026 cohort, which is really exciting. This is a free program. It supports Connecticut school districts, especially those located in distressed municipalities. They'll help you in planning and deploying electric school bus fleets, which is huge, huge for the environment, huge for the health of our young people in the state, and more. So I want to turn it over to you, Kevin, to share all this good news on this October morning. So thanks again.
Perfect. Thanks, Jessica. Yeah, really excited to be here. And, like I mentioned in my our little prep session, I aim for a pretty wide presentation. So, folks can connect with any part of the school bus electrification world as they're interested in, whether that's on the planning side, the funding side, the kind of utility and infrastructure side. So tried to include a little bit of everything in my presentation. So I'll walk through that. And then we'll leave a lot of time for questions and discussion with the folks that are on. So we're gonna make sure I do this properly. I just want to confirm that you all are seeing the full slide
It's
here.
perfect. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. So yeah, like I mentioned, we'll be taking a pretty wide view here. So I'm just going to start with a Green Bank overview, go into the policy side of things with our state level Clean Air Act and the school bus electrification requirements that are embedded in there. Talk a bit about the Green Bank's braided investments model with school buses, and then talk about the accelerator and answer any questions that come up. So, backing up to the Green Bank level, our mission and vision is to essentially use limited public dollars to de-risk various clean energy and clean transportation and environmental infrastructure investments, to make them attractive to the market and start rallying in private dollars. And so in our 15 years or so of operation, we've had a 7-to-1 leverage ratio on bringing in those private dollars versus the public spend. And so we're really proud of that ratio. And generally speaking, we seek to confront climate change and support Connecticut's various clean energy policy goals and mandates. So I just talked a little bit about our goals on the leveraging limited public resources side. On the school bus side, my work really sits across the middle and right-hand columns here, with electric school buses being a more early stage technology. I'd say that historically a lot of the Green Bank's investment has flowed to the rooftop solar and energy efficiency worlds, which are really well served by both our capital and private capital. And so we're looking into new areas for us to expand our investments and our impact. And so I think electric school buses are a great example of a market that's ready to be transformed with new forms of investment and new forms of contracts. And then as well, I think that there's just an incredible opportunity to strengthen Connecticut's communities, mainly through public health improvements. And so, again, at the Green Bank, we have a whole host of solutions to serve the home and building energy markets. We have an incredibly robust contractor network that helps bring in a lot of business for us. On the school bus side, I'd say that my work really cuts across the investment solutions and community solutions domains. And then I do want to just plug for folks that I will touch on our energy storage solutions program, because we're seeking to promote vehicle to grid charging solutions through that program, which is a really great fit with electric school buses. So I'll come back to that a little bit later on. And so I mentioned this just a minute ago, but a big driver of why the Green Bank has gotten into this work and why there was a state level Clean Air Act passed is just due to the frankly unfortunate public health and outcomes that we have due to our poor air quality. So the American Lung Association every year puts together a kind of a state of the states report. In Connecticut, I'd say year after year gets really disappointing results. And so 4 of our 8 counties receive an F for ground level ozone or smog grades, and then 3 of our 8 receive a D. And I think then, unsurprisingly, you see that those outcomes in children's health metrics. And so, unfortunately, our child asthma rates are almost 2 times the national average. The state of Connecticut puts together a really robust school asthma reports every year, and so we do have school district specific asthma rates across the state. And I'd say, unsurprisingly, there is a linkage between how underserved or overburdened those school districts are and what their asthma rates are. And so, with some of the communities we're working with, like CTEX in East Hartford and Hartford, those child asthma rates are well above 15% and approaching 20%, which is 3x the national average. So that's one of the things that we're hoping to address with school bus electrification. And so moving on to the policy and the requirements themselves. So the Connecticut Clean Air Act is Public Act 22-25, and I've copied in the full text here for the 2030 requirements. And so it's a little bit of a lot of wordy terminology there, but the long and the short of it is that by 2030, all of our environmental justice community schools are supposed to transition to electric school buses or zero emission school buses, and then statewide all public schools by 2040. So that's a pretty ambitious requirement, and one that's going to take a lot of planning and investment to reach. DEEP does have a matching grant program that the Green Bank is kind of collaborating with them on. The bond commission has made $6 million of $40 million available thus far. I'd say the main consideration with those funds is that they have to be paired with a federal award. So they are very useful, but they have to be used in a very targeted fashion in concert with federal funds. And then one really big innovation as well from the Connecticut Clean Air Act was extending out the maximum term between a school district and a school bus operator from 5 years to 10 years if the contract either includes electric school buses or requires that they be deployed. And so with one of the deals we're supporting, that 10-year authority has been absolutely crucial to the overall investment opportunity. And I'll go into that a little bit more later. I did want to put this slide up just to kind of remind myself to mention to everyone that Connecticut has a pretty unique school bus market. About 90% of our school buses are operated by the private market versus being owned and operated by school districts themselves. That's a bit unusual. I think the national average is about 60% of school districts own and operate their own school bus fleets. And so Connecticut is very tilted towards the private operator side. I don't think that's good or bad necessarily. I think it's just a really important consideration for planning and for investment. Generally speaking, I'd say that the Green Bank tends to tether our investments to the term of the contract between the school district and the school bus operators. That's why longer contracts tend to open up new investment opportunities for us. This market share breakdown is based on some 2023 DMV data, so I do need to go back and update this to get the most accurate numbers, but I'd say generally speaking, I think a lot of folks would know the names First Student and DATCO. They're the 2 biggest providers in the state. And then from there, I'd say STA and one of their companies, All Star Transportation, are kind of the next leaders. And then from there, Durham School Services and a number of smaller, often local businesses tend to make up the rest of the mix. And so a relatively diffuse market where I think a variety of investment solutions will be needed to serve these different players. And the Green Bank is excited to figure out what all of that looks like. So I wanted to pull this news as well from 2024. And so I've sort of hinted that this 10-year authority has been really crucial to driving school bus electrification. There's only one school district so far in Connecticut that has used this option, and it's Branford Public Schools, who entered into a 10-year contract with Zoom, which is a California-based school bus operator that has recently expanded to the Northeast and the East Coast. And so in 2024, they agreed a 10-year contract and then included a handful of essentially electrification provisions in the contract with a firm deadline of a 5-year transition plan. And so Zoom has subsequently gotten one EPA award, Branford's gotten another one, and after lots of structuring and deliberation, the Green Bank has been approved by its board to support essentially all of the remaining outstanding costs to electrify those 49 school buses, which is incredibly exciting, and happy to answer any specific questions about that project. I also want to highlight that we're working with Autumn Transportation and Hartford Public Schools. We'll be lending them about $2 million for 25 school buses. They're getting a really large award that's been facilitated by DeVivo Bus Sales. And so this has also been a really exciting project to work on, particularly given those asthma and public health metrics I shared earlier in Hartford. And so I'd say in terms of the braided funding model that I mentioned, there is essentially one flagship federal program that provides funding for electric school buses. It's EPA's Clean School Bus Program. It was provided with $5 billion when the bipartisan infrastructure law was passed in 2022. And so they're currently deliberating another round of funding. So if you squint your eyes, you can see that on this landing page, it says the EPA anticipates awarding up to $965 million in this round. And so they currently have $2.2 billion remaining. So I think it's everyone's anticipation that they'll work to expend and allocate those funds prior to their lapse in the fall of 2026. So I think this just sort of points to the opportunity that there is still federal funding available to support school bus electrification, and that getting involved with planning could be really worthwhile to pursue this funding, because I think it's really up in the air whether this program gets reauthorized beyond its original 5-year statutory term. And so I wanted to give that kind of overall braided funding model and federal grant context, because I think that's where a lot of school district folks and school bus operators think is, how do we pay for these buses, which tend to be pretty expensive. I do want to also give a little bit of the local regulatory context as well, because I think it's really important to understand that piece, especially because PURA has recently issued a final decision that provides a lot of market certainty moving forward. And so PURA recently issued a final decision in their full docket title of PURA investigation into medium and heavy duty electric vehicle charging. So we, just refer to that as the medium and heavy duty docket here at the Green Bank. And I think the important thing to understand here is that there were priority vehicles that PURA was looking at in this proceeding, which were school buses and transit buses, given the electrification requirements that they have in state statute. Last mile delivery fleets were also a focus area, but I'd say school buses and transit buses were the main drivers of some of the decisions that were made. And I'd say that those decisions revolved around 3 key areas, which were infrastructure, incentives, essentially the charging rate that medium and heavy duty EVs can now enroll on, and then something referred to as fleet advisory services, which is essentially just technical planning. And the Green Bank will be running that portion of the program. And so you may be thinking, what is make-ready infrastructure? I think the simplest way to think of it is just all of the equipment that's needed to, essentially plug into the grid from the charger to the distribution system. So all of the trenching and wiring and equipment that needs to be installed to support that can get expensive. There's certainly economies of scale with installing some of this infrastructure, so it can be proportionally a big cost for smaller projects. And then I think the cost can be relatively predictable as long as you don't go over the kind of hosting capacity limit of the site. And so that's something that Eversource and UI will weigh in on, but they do have some planning tools that are really, really helpful and are indicative of the capacity that's available on the system to support charging. And so given the, I'd say, somewhat unforeseen costs here on the planning side, and just the fact that they do cost a good chunk of money, there was sort of a limited infrastructure incentive made available. And so the way that this is going to roll out in the near term is that there will be up to 4 demonstration projects, 2 in Eversource territory and 2 in UI territory. And those projects will be in disadvantaged communities. That definition is still to be determined, but I think it'll, by and large, be tethered to the 2030 school district requirements for school bus electrification. In terms of how the incentive is calculated, you essentially just take the sum load of all of the chargers and add those up and then multiply that by $1,300 per kilowatt. So at the Green Bank, more and more we're seeing school bus operators electing to install 30 kilowatt chargers. That's essentially a low-powered DC fast charger. And so if you were doing 10 school buses with 10 chargers of 30 kilowatts each, that would be 300 kilowatts times $1,300 is $390K in incentives. And so that would likely cover your essentially make-ready installation costs for the project. There's also an EV charging hardware incentive available, which is up to 50% of the cost of those stations and up to $400,000 per site. And I'd say that the PURA and the EDCs want to be, the electric distribution companies want to be relatively selective with the sites that get these limited incentives. And so having a robust electrification plan will be part of that. And that can be developed either independently or through the Green Bank's Fleet Electrification Accelerator that I'll talk about a little bit more soon. I just went into some of the kind of fixed infrastructure costs involved with school bus electrification, but also want to talk about the, the marginal or ongoing costs related to charging the vehicles themselves. And so another key part of this PURA decision was essentially making available a custom rate for medium and heavy duty EVs. I'd say that the status quo was that these vehicles were using a charging rate that was more intended for buildings with really predictable load. Electric vehicles tend to be a little bit more spiky in how they consume electricity. And so you can end up in a situation where you maybe aren't actually consuming that much electricity over a month, but you tend to draw electricity relatively quickly from the grid. And so your demand charges can be pretty high and drive up your average charging costs versus there being a rate that is more, I'd say, understanding of the patterns that EVs charge. And so I'd say coming up with that rate that reflects that the behavior of these vehicles was really important. And so I'd say in the early data, we're seeing that about 40% savings from mid 40s cents per kilowatt hour down to like the mid 20s or so. So from like 45 cents per kilowatt hour down to 25 to 27, which is really exciting. I'd say that anything over 40 cents per kilowatt hour makes electric school buses quite uneconomical. Getting down to the 20s range is where I think it's possible that you can see long-term savings when integrating grants and Green Bank financing. And then the only other thing I'll mention here is that there is a time of use component. So charging during off-peak hours can lead to even greater savings. So in terms of some, I'd say, high-level takeaways here, I'd say that PURA's final decision provides certainty on core market development factors, those being the infrastructure incentives and the charging the ongoing charging costs that will be accrued. One really crucial aspect here is that there's going to be no demand charges for at least 12 months when you're enrolling on this new rate. And so I think, demand charges tend to be something that's pretty scary and uncertain. And so the fact that you can essentially experiment with an electric school bus fleet is really great without having to worry about taking on those additional charges. And so the one thing that Bureau has not yet provided certainty on is the vehicle to grid charging space. As I mentioned, the Green Bank does co-administer the state's energy storage solutions program. And so we're currently pushing to open that program up from just stationary storage to vehicles as well. And so that could potentially provide a really strong recurring revenue source for electric school buses. I'd say the big benefit of Connecticut's energy storage market structure is that it's very summer oriented. And so we think it works really well with electric school bus deployments, and the fact that a lot of these school buses, their daily routes won't be interfered with by the energy storage, the events that are called. And moving on to the accelerator itself. So the Green Bank has been selected by PURA to implement the Fleet Advisory Services program that I mentioned. And so we're currently launching our fall pilot cohort with Preston Public Schools, and CTEX, that's the Connecticut Technical and Education Career System. So we're going to be working with them across a handful of their campuses, which is really exciting. And then we're actively recruiting for our January 2026 cohort. We're targeting this cohort towards distressed municipalities, and the planning services will be completely free for those school districts to participate. And then from there, I think we'll likely open up the program to all school districts with the focus on the 2030 affected districts. I'd say that even if your school district is not a distressed municipality, to certainly still get in touch, and we can see if we can squeeze you in or get you on a short list or something of that nature. So if you click the hyperlink there, you'll go to our page, which has a little bit more information on the program itself. And I'd say, generally speaking, we're looking to just develop a robust planning to investment pipeline in the state. And now I just emphasize for folks that now is a really great time for planning, kind of now that we have that market certainty from PURA, and we know what the future electric costs are gonna be. I think we just have a lot more opportunities to get our arms around this challenge and recommend kind of right-sized projects for schools and their school bus operators. So in terms of the accelerator itself, there are two separate pathways. There's a planning pathway and a deployment pathway. The planning pathway steps are on the screen here. And so I'd say that, first and foremost, that there's going to be vehicle and charger recommendations based on the specific routes for that school district. There'll be an on-site assessment that gets into a lot of those make-ready infrastructure questions and the utility questions I've been talking about. And all of that information will essentially flow into a district-specific roadmap. And our vision with that roadmap is that it can be essentially an ongoing resource to inform RFPs and contracts, but also something that could be appended to a federal or state grant application to make that application stronger, and essentially just show that a lot of background work has gone into the project. And so we think with that balance that it'll help support that investment pipeline I just mentioned. And then on the back end, we're also going to be offering a deployment support pathway for schools and operators that are then launching electric school buses, essentially in that initial term, to make sure that there are no hiccups, or if there are, they're quickly addressed. And so this is essentially like an ad hoc service that we can provide to schools and operators if they move forward with school bus electrification. And I think that's it for my slides. I know I covered a lot of a lot of ground there. And so I just, emphasize to folks that our ask is to get in touch. The Green Bank is here to support schools and their school bus operators, and we're always happy to talk to folks about electrification planning and everything that goes into it, and what is the right fit for that specific school district given their routes, their contracts, their operator partners, pretty much everything. So we're always happy to discuss. And now I'm excited to get into questions.
Awesome, Kevin. That was really informative. There's a lot of exciting stuff that's happening or soon to be happening in the state. We're a small group, so if folks want to come off mute and ask questions, if you have them, please do. We can kind of treat this as a conversation. Also, if you're not comfortable or not able, feel free to use the chat. So I'll pause if anyone has any questions on their mind. While people think of their questions, I have a lot actually. So, is there, just thinking back to your presentation, at one point you said that the state law requiring electric school buses is for EJ communities as of 2022. Is there a firm list of which towns are on that list?
We have one that we would be happy to share with folks. I don't know if there's one on the state website, but I think it is just, I think it is good to reference that the statute as written does tether to that 2022 list. And so I think there are a handful of distressed municipalities that if they went and looked at the 2025 list, they might think that they're on the 2030 timeline, but they may not be. So I would just say get in touch to confirm whether you are or not. And I think it's good generally to think about the distressed municipalities, which are essentially the entire district is considered EJ versus other school districts just have individual census block groups that are considered EJ. And so we tend to refer to those as like the full and partial EJ districts. And I'd say for the distressed municipalities, there tend to be more state level resources that can come to bear to support those investments. So I'd say not a clear answer. So getting in touch to clarify is probably the best thing to do.
Very good. And they should contact you.
Yes. Me or Jason. Yeah.
And another question, just logistically, let's say you're a town, you don't own your own school buses, you have a company you contract with. How do you make them, if it's the law, you have to have electric school buses, how do you do that if you don't control the school buses that the company has and there's not a company that will serve you with electric school buses?
Sure. I mean, I think the strongest lever is the RFP and contract process. So writing in to, your RFPs, what your electrification expectations would be, and then getting those into the contract. I will be honest that, that's going to come with a higher quoted daily rate price tag for the electric school buses. And so I'd say not only do schools need to have that be clear from the upfront that they want that, but then on the contracting side, building in provisions that essentially help the school district and the operator share in both the risk and the reward of accessing federal grant funds. So because I think, what the school will receive is likely a daily rate that it does not include those federal grant funds. And so just building in some flexibility to the contract that, if your operator goes and gets a $5 million grant from the EPA, that then the district enjoys that benefit as well. And then I think there are narrower provisions related to, who pays for the electricity or who pays for the fuel now. And then I think the school bus yard ownership piece is another really big one, and whether the school district or the operator either owns or leases that property. So a lot to do, I'd say, ahead of getting to an RFP and a contract to think about.
Folks, Megan.
Hi, yeah. Sorry, there's no raise your hand function, I don't think. So I am working with the city of Hartford, and just trying to learn more about this program. I was a little late. Sorry, I had to install Zoom. I'm new to the city. Um, this statute that you're referring to, is it in effect right now, or is it by like a 2030 thing? I'm sorry if I missed that earlier.
No, Megan, totally fine. Yeah, so the Connecticut Clean Air Act was passed in 2022.
Okay.
And so then Hartford is on the 2030 timeline
Okay.
to electrify its fleet. And you may have missed the section as well where I talked about the investment that we're doing with Autumn Transportation for
Okay.
the 25 electric school buses that they'll be deploying with Hartford Public Schools. So
Nice.
yeah. So yeah, if you want to, connect offline, would be
That would be
happy
great.
to. Yeah, we've already, I'd say, discussed the accelerator opportunity with the on the autumn side, and I think they're certainly on our short list for the winter 2026 cohort. So if you want to chat about any of that past context, I'd be happy to meet.
Yeah, that would be great. I'll definitely reach out to you. One of the other question I had was with respect to this new round of grant funding that's coming out, or potentially we're waiting to see if I understand correctly.
Mhm.
The 2 billion that remains. Do we have a sense of when we're going to find out whether that money is actually going to be available?
Yeah, great question. So I'd say what I'm hearing through the grapevine, game of telephone, whatever you want to call, is end of calendar year for
Okay.
EPA Clean School Bus Program. So
Okay.
that would be that first tranche of funding. So if you take their projections as fact, then they would have a bit over $1 billion remaining for one more round prior
Right.
to the kind of 5-year term of that
Okay.
program.
Okay, great. Okay, great.
Yeah, and then
And
the final thing I'll add is
yeah,
I know that Hartford and Autumn have been successful in pursuing funding. I'm not sure if they put in another application for this current round,
okay.
but that EPA as well does essentially split communities into priority and non-priority communities, and so the priority communities are eligible for higher per bus funding amounts, and
Cool.
Hartford is on that priority list as well.
That's fabulous to hear. I have to figure out who's been liaising on this. So,
Okay, it should have
but
been.
and
Yeah.
Kevin, did you drop your email into the link, or will
Um,
how do we get
I
that? How
will.
do I
I'll put
reach
it
out to
in
you?
right now.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah, and yeah, Megan, I can just forward you some emails I've had on the accelerator front as well.
That would
The
be wonderful.
the
Thank you.
autumn folks. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Kevin. All right, that's all I have right now for questions.
I have a question related to kind of more of like the deployment side of things.
Mhm.
I was curious, like related to the actual like electrification process with the electricity source. Is it primarily tying into the grid with kind of like earmarking for clean energy sources, or is there kind of on-site solar, or is this more of like a case specific, depending on the school district and the resources they have
Yeah.
available?
Willie, I think that's a really good question. I would say if they're plugging into the grid, the electrons are coming from wherever. I'd say the good thing about when plugging into the grid with like the school bus emissions outlook is that just the fact that school buses often don't need to charge during on peak times, so that kind of like 5 to 8 p.m. window when the grid tends to be the have the most fossil sources kind of in the mix. I'd say the duty cycle of the school buses enables them to charge overnight when there's potentially a lower fossil component of the overall grid. And then your point on on-site solar, I think is a really good one as well, because I think with, any on-site solar that is integrated to offsetting those costs, it's going to be really beneficial to the what's called like referred to as like the total cost of ownership of the fleet. And so the Green Bank does have some solar planning resources as well for schools, and we've actually just started to scope our first electric school bus solar project with an operator in the state. So that's really exciting as well. So yeah, happy to talk more about the sort of electricity planning and emissions considerations with school buses.
It's really interesting. Thank you so much.
Yeah. And Jason, if you can just drop our solar map link in the chat, I think that'd be helpful.
You want to say a little bit more about the solar map?
Sure. Yeah. So it was essentially is our technical assistance planning for schools and municipalities in Connecticut, and is a relatively like risk-free way for, let's say, a school district to scope whether they should put solar on a building. And so similar to the school bus model, the technical assistance planning is free. On the solar side, if the district, for example, moves forward with the project, which is often for like a 20-year term for those solar assets, if they move forward with the project, we just kind of wrap those planning costs into the long-term life of the loan. So if you accrue $25,000 in planning costs to figure out the right solar system to put in, then we spread those costs out across those 20 years, so they become a lot easier to bear. And so that's something that I think we one day may do on the school bus side as well, to make it more appetizing for either districts or operators to pursue both planning and investment, and just trying to make those costs be as easy to bear as possible.
I mean, can you tell us a little bit about how many towns or entities you're picking or recruiting for the January 2026 cohort?
Sure. So I'd say we're targeting 3 to 5. And I'd say with the cohort model, that's really just for us the Green Bank to organize our own recruitment and promotion and everything. It's not going to be a cohort where, school district A is swapping notes with school district B or any of those sort of things that sometimes happen in sort of organized gatherings. It's really just a recruitment ease tool for us. And so I think I would love to get a mix of both school districts, urban, rural, everything in between, and then school bus operators as well. So the market share graph I showed has some of the names that we hope to work with, but I think just deepening our relationships with all of the operators is beneficial given the market context that we have in Connecticut.
Excellent. And if folks are interested, the link is in the chat. If you want to learn more, you can also probably contact Kevin. I don't want to offer that up, but I'm sure he would welcome the conversation.
I'm always happy to talk to schools or their operators about their specific situation and what might make sense. And I'd say oftentimes that conversation ends with, okay, perfect, we'll come back to you in 9 months when we're starting to think about our RFP, and the timing would be right for to do planning work. And so it's I'd say it's a very no risk, no stress conversation, and just trying to figure out what makes the most sense for that district and that operator.
Awesome. All right. Any other questions from folks before we wrap up? Okay. Kevin, thank you so much for sharing. In true Green Bank fashion, we've been very efficient this morning. We've covered a lot of ground, a lot of important information is here, and it has been recorded. We will share the recording out if you missed anything. So Megan, if you want to catch up on the earlier portion, we will share that. But again, want to thank you, Kevin, for your time, for information, for the work that you're doing, and thanks to everyone who was able to join us this morning. And I hope you all have a wonderful day and a great weekend, because we are pretty close.
Awesome. Thanks, Jessica. Really appreciate it.
You.
And yeah, encourage folks to reach out.
All right. Thanks all. Bye-bye.
So much.
Take care.